In today's video, we'll be discussing the importance of freight broker margins and why it's one of the big reasons brokers aren't successful. I'm Benjamin Kowalski with Freight 360, where we provide the latest transportation sales tips and training videos to help you reach your goals faster. If you're new here, make sure you go ahead and hit the subscribe button below, and all the details will be found in the description box. And for more free content, please be sure to add our weekly podcast, Freight 360, to your playlist. Let's jump into it. As a freight broker, it's important to understand your profit margins and what comes out of them. Whether you're a licensed freight broker, a freight agent, or you're employed by a freight brokerage, you need to understand your margins. Margins are what ultimately pay freight brokers and are often the leading cause of failure for some brokerages. Let's start off with what is margin? In its simplest terms, margin is the difference between what you bill your customer and what you'll be paying your carrier. So let's say you have a customer paying you $1,000 and you booked a carrier to haul that shipment for $850. That means you'll have a margin or gross profit of $150 or 15%. Now, you'll often hear margin referred to in both percentages and dollar amounts. And at the end of the day, you get paid in dollars and cents, not percentage points. But that being said, higher margin percentages will always lead to a higher margin dollar amount. It's that simple to calculate. But what comes out of that margin and what should you be shooting for margins, right? What should your margins be? Now, as a broker, your margin is the only money you'll have to cover your expenses and earn a living. And once you've paid the carrier, the remaining money must be enough to cover every expense associated with that shipment and a small percentage of your fixed costs. But most importantly, it also includes what you'll actually earn for doing the work. It's more realistic to track your average margin over a time frame, such as a week, a month, or even a year. Why this is because so much can change from one load to the next. For example, loads with longer miles and higher billable dollars usually have a lower margin percentage. This is because the actual profit tends to be a smaller portion of the customer's invoice. A simple example is comparing a short LTL run versus a long haul FTL shipment or full truckload. So some less than truckload LTL shipments can pay as little as $100, with the broker only profiting, we'll say $20 for example. Now, while a long haul full truckload shipment might pay as much as $5,000 with a $500 profit built into it. The LTL example gives us a 20% margin. $20 out of a $100 bill, right? 20%. While the FTL shipment only yields a 10% margin, $500 into $5,000, right? Now, obviously the dollar amount is higher on the full truckload shipment, which is why we always need to consider the dollar amounts and the margin percentages together, right? We've pulled some data from 2020 and it showed that freight brokers average around 15% overall, with each load yielding around an average $270 in profit. Now, we tend to find most successful brokers average somewhere between 12 and 18% in margin. Sure, there are some outliers that are above and below that, but this is the bulk of the brokers that we've worked with, right? Next, why do margins matter? The margin pays you and your expenses, right? So no matter what kind of business you have, you need to have a positive margin to stay afloat. Some newer brokers attempt to move freight at a loss to gain accounts in the very beginning. Now, we want to caution you here because this is a very slippery slope, since you'll need to make up for that loss at some point to actually become profitable. And no customer wants to have their rates increased, especially if there's no other reason than the broker priced them negatively to get their foot in the door, right? Trust me here. Now, you're not going to pull a fast one on them, and they're going to be keeping a keen eye on your rates going forward if you start suspiciously low. And even if your profits and your margins are positive, it's not smart to price a customer super low in the beginning just to gain their business. We see brokers all the time that try to operate at close to, we'll say, 5% margin, right? So they can be the cheapest option. Most of them end up shutting their doors quickly after that because they're not making enough money to actually keep the lights on. So calculate your cost per load, because you might be a savvy salesperson on the phone and you might be able to cover freight with ease, but that doesn't mean you're understanding your financials and break-even points like a pro. It's crucial for you to understand your financials enough to determine your cost per load or your break-even point. For example, if you move 100 loads on average each month and you have $5,000 in expenses per month before you turn a profit, those are your bills such as your software, your insurance, your load boards, everything else. You can calculate the average expense on a per load basis. In this example, $5,000 in monthly expenses over 100 loads would equate to $50 per load. 5,000 divided by 100 gives you $50 per load in expenses. This gives you a good idea of how much you need to earn on each load before you're actually turning a profit. Now, some larger brokerages will require their employees or agents make a certain amount on each load before they're eligible to collect a commission. This is precisely why they do that. Look to the future. If you're a W-2 broker, you won't need this level of detail. Your employer probably just tells you what your volume needs to be and where your margin should be, and how much you need to make per shipment. They've done their homework already for you. Now, licensed brokers really need to understand margin to be successful. Freight agents, they fall somewhere in the middle, since they aren't an employee and they aren't responsible for the company's financials. Agents, they simply move a load and earn a percentage of the load profit. All that being said, good paying customers and healthy margins are usually a requirement for an agent to be offered a home at one of the top agent-based brokerages. Those are the ones with the high commission splits, right? Now, if you'd like more on this topic, please add your questions to the comments below or reach out to us at freight360.net. And remember, whether you believe you can or believe you can't, you're right.